Hey there, Robert John Hadfield from Audiomover here again to talk about some classic vinyl. Now this one, Billy Squier, Don't Say No. I tell you, I've hesitated. I do a lot of these videos of old records. I've hesitated to do any Billy Squier because this guy meant so much to me when I was a young guy. I loved him so much, and that there's so many things I would want to say just about Billy Squier when I start talking about anything related to him. This, of course, was his biggest record. I mean, this is the one that sold more than anything else he'd done. This wasn't his first record. This was his second album as a solo artist. But like he represented for me personally just everything that I wanted to be. You know, because I was learning how to play the guitar. I'd started a little band, and I was a 14, 15-year-old kid. And he looked cool. He had a great singing voice. He was a guitar player, had this really cool tone when he played the guitar. He wrote great songs. And he just had this charisma. There was something about him that was just so awesome. And I just loved this guy. And so, you know, this album was kind of a quintessential Billy Squier album and had so many hits on it. And I'll tell you, as a fan of Billy Squier, this will kind of put a point on what I mean about how much I was into this guy. So he came touring through Denver, Colorado on the next album, which was Emotions in Motion. And Def Leppard was opening up for Billy Squier. And today that sounds like crazy because Def Leppard became so huge. But at the time, Billy Squier was huge. Def Leppard was touring on the Pyromania tour, which ended up becoming so huge that later on that tour they became the headliners. But at the time, they were an opening act, opening up for Billy Squier. Well, all my friends and I that were going to see this concert, they were all going to see Def Leppard. And I was going to see Billy Squier. But when I got there, you know, the frenzy and the fervor over Def Leppard had become so big that I got kind of caught up in it, and rather than buying a Billy Squier t-shirt, I went and bought a Def Leppard t-shirt. And, you know, they came out on stage, Def Leppard did, and they played, and their music is great. I mean, it's undeniable. They're awesome. The music is crazy good. You know, they just played all their great stuff at the time, you know, stuff off of High and Dry, stuff off of Pyromania, and it was cool. It was great. Billy Squier comes out on stage, and the audience kind of turned on him a little bit. You know, they were so into Def Leppard at the time that Billy Squier started seeing less significant. But I'll tell you something. Even as an undiscerning 14, 15-year-old kid, when I walked out of there that night, Billy Squier was better. He was a better performer. The concert was better. His stage presence was better. It probably should be because he was a real veteran. You know, he'd been around for a while, playing in other bands, and so anyway, I loved this guy. I thought he was amazing, and he was so this album was, you know, to me and to a lot of people, this was kind of represented the 80s in a lot of ways, 80s rock. It was this interesting thing where it had this raw energy, raw guitars, great singing, but because of the guy that produced it, which we'll talk about in a second, there was also some really cool kind of, I don't know, keyboard stuff in it, and it just ended up having this great blend. It was a fantastic album, and it was just kind of the best of what Billy Squier had to offer, which showed in how many it sold. This sold, I've seen different things, but 3 to 4 million copies of this album sold. So it did like extremely, extremely well. And anyway, so let's flip it over and let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, this is such a cool picture. You know, Billy Squier, blue jeans, and he's holding a Fender Telecaster, and I don't know, you know, he's sitting what looks almost like a bathroom or something with the tile. Anyway, so flip it over. You see another picture of him in that same space, and he's got kind of a smirk on his face, and anyway, Billy Squier sitting there. But then you start looking at this track list and you realize why this album was as big as it was. You know, it starts off with this song, In the Dark, which was, I don't know if you remember that tune, but it was so awesome. In the dark. That was an example of, I think, that that percussive kind of keyboard sound that came after when he'd say after in the dark, it was so cool, man. It was a great song. The Stroke, of course, was a huge hit. I mean, I remember when that song came out, it had that boom, crack, boom, crack. Everybody, have you heard? His voice was so great. Anyway, then My Kind of Lover, which might be the best song on this album, and probably his best song ever. My Kind of Lover. So awesome. And then You Know What I Like, another great song. 2 Days Gone, that might be the only song on this album that's kind of, it's still a cool tune, but it doesn't even come close to the rest of this album. But it was still kind of cool. The next side, Lonely as the Night. My gosh, that thing didn't even chart, and it was still a great song. It started out with that guitar riff, that and then he just starts singing, just him and the electric guitar, Lonely as the Night, and oh man, it was so great. What Do You Want From Me kind of had that tribal rhythm in it. Man, that was awesome. Nobody Knows kind of slowed down a little bit. And I think that was the one that was, I could be wrong about this, I think we'll see on the inside, but that was the one that was dedicated to John Lennon. You kind of keep in mind, when this came out, it wasn't that much longer after John Lennon had been killed. Anyway, so yeah, when did this come out? I'm going to look and see if I can see here. This was 1981. Album came out in 1981. Yeah, so would that have been a year plus after John Lennon had been killed? So Nobody Knows. And then I Need You. Bum, 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 I Need You. Great song. And then to wrap up this album with the title track, Don't Say No, which was such an interesting song in so many different ways. And one of the ways it was really interesting to me was just the way it started. Because not a lot of songs do this, where a lot of songs ended with a fade out, but they don't start with a fade in. And this one did. This one actually, and what was so interesting about the fade in was that it sounded like he was already like halfway into the song when the fade in started. So it didn't sound, it was just such an odd thing, the way they started this tune. And then, I think, as I recall, there was another fade out of this song, and then bam, comes back in. And it ends with this refrain of don't say no, don't say no. Anyway, it was a great, fantastic, just front to back, incredible album. Now, part of what helped make this thing great is this guy that it says produced by Mac and Billy. And of course, Billy is Billy Squier. But the Mac is a guy named Reinhold Mack. And so the story behind this album and its production is that Billy Squier had actually contacted Brian May, the guitarist for Queen, because he wanted Brian May to produce it. But Brian May, due to scheduling conflicts or whatever, couldn't produce the album. And so wasn't available to produce it. But he recommended a guy that had actually produced Queen. And matter of fact, this guy, Reinhold Mack, who he had recommended produce Billy Squier's album, produce this album, had recently finished producing The Game. Remember The Game? That was one of Queen's biggest selling albums. That was the one that had Another One Bites the Dust on it. So Reinhold Mack had produced that album by Queen. And so then he came and produced this record for Billy Squier. And it kind of speaks to kind of the unique energy that this album had. And so let's take a look on the inside of this thing. So here we have another, like I said, Billy Squier was just this really cool looking guy. And, here he is, and I thought this was kind of they put this weird little thing in this picture where there's Billy Squier, and then he's got this female hand, his fingernails kind of coming in through the inside, whatever. I mean, so anyway, kind of a strange little twist to the Billy Squier standing there in a leather jacket picture. So anyway, that was kind of interesting. Flipping this thing over, and then on the back side we have the song list, and Billy Squier vocals, guitar, piano, percussion, and this was just, you know, and then all the lyrics to all these different tunes, and just once again, it was a great album, and it was interesting. So he sold 3 to 4 million copies of this, and I want to address something that has been talked about for years related to Billy Squier. You know, this was his biggest selling album. It came out in 1981, sold, like I said, between 3 and 4 million copies. So the next album Billy Squier put out was this album called Emotions in Motion. That's the tour I saw him on. And that album sold about 2 million copies. And then he put out another album after that called Signs of Life, and that album sold about 1 million copies. And this is the part I wanted to talk about. Because on that album, Signs of Life, there were 2 songs that got relatively popular. And one of them was a song called All Night Long, which I just loved. That song. It was so cool. And then another one was a song called Rock Me Tonight. Now, there are a lot of people that say that video for the song Rock Me Tonight is what destroyed his career. I want to push back on that for a second. I don't buy that idea. Although it's been said everywhere that was Billy Squier's, you know, career-killing move, was putting out this video where he's kind of crawling around this bedroom and in these whatever. If you'd ever seen Billy Squier in concert, he always had this weird androgynous sexual energy thing going on. And I'll admit to you, when I saw that video, it was a little weird. But here's the thing. By the time Billy Squier had reached that album, there were only those 2 songs on that album were any good, and the rest of the album just was sadly really forgettable. Now, this will tell you how big a Billy Squier fan I was, because I bought the next album called Enough is Enough, and I'll be honest with you, there wasn't one song on that album that I liked. I wanted to like it so much because I loved this guy. But guess what? He put out another album after that called Here and Now. And you know what? I bought that one too because I loved this guy and I wanted it to be great. But it just wasn't. His albums, and it's just like a lot of people. You know, the Enough is Enough didn't even chart at all, hardly. I don't think it sold 500,000 copies. The one after that, Here and Now, I don't think it did either. So everybody's blaming his career collapse on a bad music video for Rock Me Tonight. I think it was the fact that his music just wasn't good after that. And you know, because I'll give you an example. One of my favorite examples about this kind of thing, because you can have a career-killing move, or what seems to be a career-killing move, and not have your career killed if you keep putting out stuff that people want to listen to. And one of the most obvious examples of this, to me, is Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park, okay? So the band Kiss, you can hate them, I get it, fine. In 1978, they put out a movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and it came out in October of 1978, and it was awful. I mean, it was one of the worst movies you will ever see, just garbage. Now, who would have figured it? The movie was produced by Hanna-Barbera, the people that brought you Magilla Gorilla, Quick Draw McGraw, Yogi Bear, the Jetsons, Flintstones. Go figure, they put out some silly movie. But anyway, it was awful. And everybody expected that this was going to destroy their career because it was so ridiculously bad. And guess what? 7 months later, roughly, they put out an album, Kiss Dynasty, and it was their biggest selling album to date. They had a massive tour, filling arenas on that tour. Now, so the point is, it didn't kill their career. Now, Kiss then put out a crappy album, or kind of not as good, kind of didn't follow up very well, and their career started sinking. And then they put out another career-killing album, which was called The Elder, which everybody then, again, thought was going to destroy them forever. But they followed it up with Creatures of the Night, which did okay. And then they took their makeup off, put out Lick It Up, and they had an actual really, really good song on Lick It Up called Lick It Up. And it was genuinely catchy song. And guess what? They sold albums. And they were able to go on a tour and fill up some, relatively respectably sized places because they were putting out good music that people wanted to hear. And then they put out another album, and that was the one that had Heaven. I can't remember what it was called, but it was actually another song that charted. Heaven's on Fire. That's what it was. Heaven's on Fire. Catchy songs. So they were able to resurrect or keep their career going even after career-killing moves because they had good music. So I reject this idea that Billy Squier's career was killed by a music video, because the problem really was he stopped making good music. You can do kind of crappy, silly things that don't work that people go, eh. But I'll tell you, if this album had come out after that career-killing music video, that video wouldn't have killed his career, because this had great music that you want to listen to. And the public will be very forgiving of stupid things if you keep putting out things that the public wants to listen to. And that's really, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that really was the problem. It was that, unfortunately, and this is coming from a guy, like I said, that's a huge fan. I mean, I just kept buying his stuff even after he wasn't that great anymore. But then, and you could have, and let's, just talking about Billy Squier a little bit more, I remember, and you could have kind of seen it coming. And I'll tell you why. When he put out his next album, which was Emotions in Motion, the album cover, I don't know how many of you realize this, but was made by Andy Warhol. Now, that's kind of cool. Andy Warhol, this legendary artist, yeah, sort of. But Billy Squier is a gritty rock and roll singer, guitarist, that plays kind of gritty music. And I remember even at the time, I'm this kid, and I heard that this album cover had been made by Andy Warhol, and there's this little part of me that thought, well, that's not very rock and roll. Here he is, like, part of celebrity culture and the glitterati kind of, that Andy Warhol made his album cover. And I go, I get it, he's this rich guy now, and he's famous, and he's friends with all these super famous people, but it just, like, you kind of start losing your soul. And by the way, this is not unique to Billy Squier. I mean, think how many bands, how many artists you've seen that reach their peak after that second or third album, and then they just disappear. And it's all for the same reason. It's not because of a bad music video. It's because their music sucks. It's because everything that they do after that third album, when they really start making it and they're huge, they lose their soul. Go back to Rocky, they lose the eye of the tiger. And then they just start to stink, and their music's just not good. And once again, that's, in my opinion, that is why his career went off the rails. He had an amazing career and sold an enormous amount of records, but when his music started to not be that good, we just all kind of lost interest in him. And even a guy like me who wanted to love his music, I wanted to like his music, I kept buying it, and it just wasn't there. I didn't care about the videos, silly, whatever, I didn't care. But I buy a couple of more albums, and you go, dude, you're not giving me something I want to listen to. I want to like this, but I keep giving you money, and it's just not that good. So I don't want to buy anymore. That's the career-killing move. Is not a bad music video. The career-killing move is becoming so famous and so rich that you lose the energy that got you there. And that, in my opinion, is what had really happened with Billy Squier. He kept putting records out, and they kept getting worse and worse, or less good, because they were okay, but they weren't good enough. And you could then see after that Andy Warhol one, go look at his album covers after that. The next one, Signs of Life, got kind of weirder, kind of more artsy, and then they kind of became self-absorbed, where the next album covers were just pictures of, well, they were like this, but they were just sexy Billy Squier, and then it got even weirder where anyway, just go look at him. He had this other album cover where it was this weird modern painting. I don't want to say painting. It was almost digital looking thing with him and a skyline of a city behind him. And then it goes to this Egyptian eye. I mean, like on the cover of Alan Parsons. I mean, like I said, in my humble opinion, that's why the guys. I didn't mean to go off on this, but like I said, Billy Squier was such a big deal to me, and I'm a huge fan of this dude, and this album was so spectacular. And if you haven't listened to this in a while, bust it out, because I'm telling you something. Here we are in what is this? What is this? We're in 2023 now, but we're in February of 2023, and in my opinion, this album is as good today as it was the day it came out. The music is spot on, spectacular. It's raw, it's gritty, it's got energy, the lyrics are thoughtful, the singing is spectacular, and so this is one of the great albums, and it's worth listening to, and this guy was just at the top, at his peak right here. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and of course, if you have old audio videotapes, go to audiomover.com. If you're interested in supporting our channel, go support Audiomover. Go find some old audio and videotapes that you need to get converted to digital and send them to Audiomover, and that's a great way to support the work that we do here. Anyway, with that, have a fantastic day.